Shabbat Shalom, everyone. This wonderful, wonderful day we celebrate Israel's independence. And so let's turn to page 82 in our prayer books, because there's some songs that really originate from Israel. What I love so much about Israel is that sometimes a song from our liturgy will be a popular song on the radio. Where else would that be? Right? So we'll turn to page 82, and we'll start with Eile Chamda Libi, which is the second song, the one that's in front of the letter Bet. Eile Chamda Libi, Chusana ve'al nati talem. Eile Chamda, Chamda Libi, Chusana ve'al nati talem. Eile Chamda, Chamda Libi, Chusana ve'al nati talem. Eile Chamda Libi, Chusana ve'al nati talem. Eile Chamda, Chamda Libi, Chusana ve'al nati talem. Eile Chamda, Chamda Libi, Chusana ve'al nati talem. Let's go to Dalit, the number 4 song on there. Esa enai el heharim, me'ayin yavo ezri. Esa enai el heharim, me'ayin yavo ezri. Ezri me'im Adonai, Ose shamayim va'aretz. Ezri me'im Adonai, Ose shamayim va'aretz. Esa enai el heharim, me'ayin yavo ezri. Esa enai el heharim, me'ayin ya. And the next one, David melech Yisrael, chai chai v'kayam. 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 Now we're going to skip to the next page, the very top of a page. It says in the Torah that Israel will spread out to the west, to the east, to the north, and to the south. Ufaratzta, 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 yama v'kema, zafona v'negba. Ufaratzta, 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 yama v'kema, zafona v'negba. Ufaratzta, yama v'kema. We don't need the words for this because we sing it every week. Here we go. Hine matovu manayim, shevet achim gam yachad. Hine matovu manayim, shevet achim gam yachad. Hine matov, shevet achim gam yachad. Hine matov, shevet achim gam yachad. Hine matov umanayim, shevet achim gam yachad. Hine matov umanayim, shevet achim gam yachad. Hine matov, la 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 la. Ine matov, ine matov. La 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 la.
It's nice to see you, those of you diehards who came out tonight, and those of you who are at home as well, to be able to celebrate Shabbat together. And this, the day after Yom HaAtzmaut, Israel's Independence Day, 74 years. Unbelievable. Right? Isn't that something like, 74 years. Right? It's believable. There you go. It's a very young country. Depending on how you look at it, what stage of life,
indeed.
It's a very young country for some people. And we're going to talk a little bit more later about Israel. I'm going to share with you some facts about Israel, just little fun things. But always important to be able to celebrate. We're going to turn in the Siddur if you're not there yet. And if at home, if you have this, or if you have the download of it as well, the Lev Shalem that we use for Shabbat, page 13, Shiru Ladonai.
Yalla la la la, yalla la 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 la, yalla la 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 again. Yalla la la la, yalla la la la, yalla la la la. Shiru Ladonai, Shir Chadash, Shiru Ladonai Kol Haaretz. 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 Yalla la la la, yalla la la la, yalla la 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 la. Shiru Ladonai, Shir Chadash, Shiru Ladonai Kol Haaretz. Shiru Ladonai, Shir Chadash, Shiru Ladonai Kol Haaretz.
On page 16, Kabbalat Shabbat, which is a series of psalms to welcome in Shabbat, continues. Or Zarua, you'll find the fourth line from the bottom of the Hebrew and the transliteration, which always makes it easy and nice when we can do that. Or Zarua.
All right. Or Zarua, Lat Tzadik, Uli Yisrael Lev Simcha. Or Zarua, Lat Tzadik, Uli Yisrael Lev Simcha. Or Zarua, Lat Tzadik, Uli Yisrael Lev Simcha. Uli Yisrael Lev Simcha. Or Zarua, Lat Tzadik, Uli Yisrael Lev Simcha. Uli Yisrael Lev Simcha. Or Zarua, Lat Tzadik, Uli Yisrael Lev Simcha. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Or Zarua, Lat Tzadik, Uli Yisrael Lev Simcha. Or Zarua, Lat Tzadik, Uli Yisrael Lev Simcha. Uli Yisrael Lev Simcha. Or Zarua, Lat Tzadik, Uli Yisrael Lev Simcha. Uli Yisrael Lev Simcha. Uli Yisrael Lev Simcha.
Page 23, Lechadodi, will begin with the first stanza. We'll remain seated, then we'll turn to page 25. For the final stanza at that point, we'll stand up, we'll rise, we'll turn towards the door. And if you're at home and you're sitting around your table or doing whatever, if you have a door nearby that you want to open and welcome in the Shabbat bride, you can join along as well. We begin together, Lechadodi.
And this is a very much an Israeli melody. So here we go. Lecha dodi likrat kala b'nei Shabbat nekabla Lecha dodi likrat kala b'nei Shabbat nekabla shamur v'zachor b'dibor echad ishmianu el hameyuchad Adonai echad u'shemo echad l'shem u'tiferet Lecha dodi likrat kala b'nei Shabbat nekabla
Rise together, page 25.
dodi likrat kala b'nei Shabbat nekabla Boi b'shalom ateret bala Gam b'simcha u'tzola Toch emunei am segula Boi chala Lecha dodi likrat kala b'nei Shabbat nekabla Lecha dodi likrat kala b'nei Shabbat nekabla
You may be seated. Without a minyan, we're going to skip over the Baruch Hu, but on page 40, you will find Ki Hem Hayenu, fourth line from the bottom in the transliteration.
Ki hem chayenu v'orech yameinu uvahem nege yomam v'layla Ki hem chayenu v'orech yameinu uvahem nege yomam v'layla Ki hem chayenu v'orech yameinu Uvahem nege yomam v'layla Ki hem chayenu v'yorech yameinu Uvahem nege yomam v'layla Ki hem chayenu v'orech yameinu Uvahem nege yomam v'layla Ki hem chayenu ve'orech yameinu uvahem nege yomam v'layla ve'avatecha al tasir mimenu le'olamim baruch ata Adonai ohev amo Yisrael.
Page 41, we invite you to close your eyes and to focus on these first 6 words of the Shema of oneness. Oneness with God, with life, with the universe, with ourselves. Shema, we join together.
Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavcha u'b'chol nafshecha u'b'chol me'odecha v'hayu הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך וקשרתם לאות על ידיך והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך.
Continue silently on page 42.
ויאמר אדוני אל משה לאמור דבר אל למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם לאלוהים אני אדוני אלוהיכם אדוני אלוהיכם
Page 44. You'll find Michamocha, the song of the sea, as the Israelites praise God with gratitude for salvation. We join together.
Yallai lai 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 yallai lai 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 yallai lai 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 yallai 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 lai 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 yallai lai lai yallai lai lai yallai yallai mihi chamocha va'elim Adonai mihi kamocha nehedar v'kodesh nora tehilot osei feleh nora tehilot osei feleh malchutecha ra'u banecha bokei hayam lifnei Moshe ze Elianu ve'ameru ay 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 Adonai yimloch le'olam va'ed Adonai yimloch le'olam va'ed yallai lai 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 yallalai yallalai yallai lai 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 yallalai lai yai lai 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 yai lai 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 yai lai 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 ונאמר כי פדה אדוני את יעקב וגאלו מיד חזק ממנו ברוך אתה אדוני גאל ישראל.
Page 45. It's hard to imagine it's been more than 2 months, the Russian invasion to Ukraine. Right? Could you ever have imagined it would go on this long? You know, at the beginning, by the way, I don't know about you, but, you know, I thought for sure that Russia was just going to, right, just roll in there. Right? I mean, we all thought. And then, you know, it wasn't going to last long, but they're going to have to try and do some diplomatic something. And then, like, they stood up and they really fought against the Russians, like one of the great heroic stories, really, of our time. And when we think about Ufros Aleinu, this tabernacle of peace, it's like you hear the stories every day, right? Coming out, Mariupol and other places, you see please, like, let there be peace, just where people can live, right? And to do what they desire in terms of a democracy, and just without this incredible antagonism and just violence committed against them. Well, our image is that sukkah of peace, and Shabbat's supposed to symbolize that as well. You'll find on page 45 the Ufros Aleinu, the third line down from the top in the Hebrew, and on the bottom, third line from the bottom.
Ufros Aleinu Sukkah, Sukkah, Shlomecha, Ufros Aleinu Sukkah, Sukkah, Shlomecha. Hey, 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 yalai, lalai, yalai, lalai, yalai, lalai, 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 yalai, lalai, yalai, lalai, ai, lalai, 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 ufros aleinu, sukkah, sukkah, shlomecha. Baruch atah Adonai, ufro haporei sukkot shalom aleinu, ve'al kol amo Yisrael, ve'al Yerushalayim.
Page 46, Vishamro.
V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. איי 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 ביני ובין בני ישראל אותי לעולם, כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ, וביום השביעי שבת ויהי נפש, וביום השביעי שבת ויהי נפש.
For the Amidah, we're going to prepare our hearts with Adonai Tzvatai Tiftach, a way of opening our hearts. The things that are so hard to, right, to articulate, somehow to feel. That's what it's about. And we try always to put, right, our thoughts, our emotions into words. I don't know about you, it often fails me. Right? Mother's Day, think about it. Those of you with, spouses, others celebrate Mother's Day, you can never quite put into words what it means to those women who are mothers to our children, right? In terms of what they do and the sense of family they create. There aren't enough words, you know this, right? And so the Amidah is a reminder that words often fail us, and so we open up our hearts. We try to find those words, and yet we acknowledge that language is often so weak. We're going to rise together. The silent Amidah, let's try that again. Silent Amidah will begin page 47. We'll begin with Adonai Tzvatai.
Adonai Sifatai Tiftach Ufi Yagi Tehilatecha Adonai, open my lips that my mouth may speak your praise. Yai, lai, lai, ya, lai, 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 lai. Ose shalom bimroma, yase shalom, aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel. Shalom Imroma, Ya'aseh Shalom, Aleinu, Ve'al kol Yisrael, Ve'al kol yoshvei tevel.
The counting of the Omer, we're going to do in a couple of minutes on page 63. In Israel, this was in ancient times, they would count the days from Passover, day after Passover, to Shavuot. And the Omer, the counting of the Omer is, by the way, it's a measure of grain. And it's a measure of weight. And so apparently, like you'd bring an Omer very often as part of a sacrifice. It has to do with the harvest that took place from Passover to Shavuot. By the way, the 5 grains that were harvested at that time in the land, and which are, not coincidentally, the 5 grains that are forbidden during Passover. Wheat, rye, spelt, barley, and oats, those 5. And that was the gestational period. And so somehow there's this connection between the land, the sustenance, right, the period of the harvest. And so I thought appropriate place before we do the counting of the Omer to talk a little about Israel, right? Because it is connected to the land of Israel. And I found some interesting facts about Israel. I just thought we could share in terms of understanding a little bit about Israel. All right, so here we go. Israel is the only country in the world that has more trees today than it had 50 years ago. Isn't that interesting? Only country in the world, more trees today than it did 50 years ago. Israel has more museums per capita than any other country, including the world's only underwater museum. Okay? Some of you would know, like technology stuff, you're not surprised, right? When I share technological advances, things like that, of course. Right? Voicemail technology was developed in Israel. Israel, this is interesting, Israel is home to the world's only theater company comprised entirely of deaf and blind actors. Deaf and blind actors. Which is interesting, right? Just think about the recent Academy Award presented, right, to the deaf actor. Life expectancy in Israel, by the way, amongst the highest in the world, 82 years. Right? So if you want to live a little bit longer, move to Israel, I guess. I don't know how that works. Coffee and cafes. How many of you have been to Israel? Who are here? You ever been to Israel? Not yet? You not? All right, you're going with me next time. You know that, right? We've been talking about this. A pandemic got in the way, right, Peter? But they have great cafes there. It's almost like Europe. And it's so good, by the way, the only country where Starbucks failed to be able to have a successful Starbucks. They tried. You know the story. They opened. And then there's this horrible rumor, by the way, that was anti-Semitic, anti-Israel, that's why they left. Charles Schultz, who's Jewish himself, right? And so, is that his first name? No, what's his first name? Charles Schultz is the, what's Schultz?
Peanuts.
Yeah, that's the peanut. What's his Howard Schultz. Thank you very much. Howard Schultz, right? And that people were accusing it, right, of being anti-Semitic or being anti-Israel. It wasn't, just it didn't succeed. On a per capita basis, Israel tops the list of countries when it comes to the annual production of scientific papers. That won't surprise you. Okay? This I didn't know. You know the city of Beersheba? You ever heard of it? Beersheba is like this town in the Negev, right? It was a development town, basically, that it has ancient roots, but it's like out in nowhere. It's become a major area, especially of academia as well. There's a university there. Anyway, Beersheba has the largest number of chess grandmasters per capita of any other city in the world. Wow. Right? And that's something like that, just grand chess masters. Let's see. Oh, this is interesting. In 2012, Israel became the first country to prohibit the use of underweight models in fashion shows. Right? Remember that whole big thing, right? There was this whole idea about that it wasn't how you wanted to portray people. That's not how you want to portray women. Don't you start, you. All right? And by the way, in many places they don't engage those kinds of models anymore. This one won't surprise you. Israel has the world's highest rate of university degrees per capita in the world. Israel developed the technology that allowed for the original cell phone. Again, no surprise. This one you probably know. An Israeli company developed the first ingestible video camera that helps doctors diagnose cancer and digestive orders. You probably knew that one, right? The first pill that you could swallow. Did you know that? Yeah, that was an Israeli innovation. This one's, Israel has more in vitro fertilization per capita than any other country, and it's free. In Israel, it's interesting. We can argue against socialized medicine and other things, right? But Israel, with its origins of a socialist country, medical, right? The medical and all health issues are, part of the socialized system of the country. So you can actually have free in vitro fertilization. This you probably won't know. It's hard to believe. Israel is only one of 3 countries in the world that does not have a constitution. Did you know that? Israel has no constitution. They just have a Declaration of Independence, right? But they have no constitution. They tried to create one. It just never happened. And there's an institute in Israel. We went there. I went there when I was a Hartman Fellow, and we talked to them. And they've actually have different drafts on record to try, and they'd still like to create a constitution. But Israel has functioned as a very viable democracy without a constitution. And it's interesting, these facts, I chose them, tell you a lot about the country, right, in different ways in terms of how it's developed and what it's about. Israel is one of 9 countries that are members of the International Space Club and capable of launching space satellites. I don't know that. This one you'll know. Israel is the only country in the world that has succeeded in reviving a dead language and using it on a daily basis as their national language. This might not surprise you. Israelis consume more fruits and vegetables relative to the population than any other nation in the world. If you like Israeli salad, I mean, they do. Yeah, when you go to Israel, you've been to Israel, right? You've been to Machane Yehuda? Machane Yehuda is in Jerusalem. That's the outdoor market there with all the fresh fruits and all the fresh fruit and some. The shuk, that's what you can call it, right? And it's unbelievable how much, right, fresh, right? Just really almost like from the kibbutz to the stand. Final one, if you talk about Israel has, by the way, it's the lowest place on earth, the Dead Sea. It's also the lowest natural body water of Galilee. A lot of natural phenomena, which the smallest. This wasn't on my list. The smallest desert in the world, the Negev. Is that like the small, in terms of an area, the smallest? And here's something I didn't know until now. 5 out of 7 natural craters in the world are located in Israel. Right? Talks about in terms of strikes and the great crater down in Negev, if you've ever been. Right, is like it's enormous, but it talks about the natural, if you will, kind of configurations and relationship of Israel. 5 out of the 7 natural craters. It's amazing. Israel is an amazing country. If you saw, I videotaped today's Shabbat message to talk any other country would be, and the Jews were obviously proud of those accomplishments of Israel. It's amazing. Only in 74 years, what Israel has been able to accomplish. Remarkable. We're going to have you rise around. We're going to do the counting of the Omer. By tradition, you never announce what night of the Omer it is, because when you say the number, it's supposed to be the first time. So our tradition always is to say that what last night was. So last night, we counted the 20th day of the Omer, and I'll leave you to figure out which night we're going to be counting. So we're going to start with the blessing on page 63, and then at the bottom of page 67, you will find, or wait a minute, not 67, hold on. The bottom of 6. Bertina de Barias, Ruth Black, Marion Brownstein, Marie Bruce, Celia Campbell, Saul Cohen, Louis Dine, Harry Edelstein, Al Epstein, Ira Epstein, Cicely Flamer, Celeste Fomelant, Neil Foreman, Sidney Glassman, Ludwig Glick, Joel Hellman, Sophie Hersk, Sarah Jacobs, Merrick James, Herman Klagsbrun, Michelle Messinger, Jack Miller, David Mintz, Dan Nachbar, Ruth Negan, Libby Orloff, Orenka Rubin, Lila Rubin, Ann Schwartzberg, Esther Scope, William Shinbane, Eva Scholklopper, Marjorie Sperling, Sam Steinberg, Harold Steinberg, Julie Stern, Milton Stiebel, Rose Taub, Robert Teplitz, Alicio Vigil, Rose Wagner, Avram Chaim Wasser, Janice Wayne, Pauline Zelkin, Fischl Zolans, and Stephen Kornreich. We're also mindful of the passing of Jan Gelfand, the wife of Leonard Gelfand. Customary not to recite the Mortis Kaddish without a minyan, but my custom is that for Kaddish, anybody reciting rise and will recite those words, and then we make a distinction by not reciting the responses, and that's how we'll acknowledge. So if you're at home as well and you're reciting Kaddish, we invite you to rise for these words you'll find on page 58. Those of you reciting Kaddish, join together. Yit Gadal v'Yit Kadash Shemei Rabbah Amen. Be'alma divrach rutei v'yamlich malchutei b'chayechon v'yomechon b'chayei dechol Beit Yisrael b'gala u'vizman kariv v'meru yehei Shmei Rabbah mavorach le'olam umei omaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitalev v'yitalal Shemei dekudesha b'richu ve'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechamata damiram be'alma Yehi Shlama Rabba Min Shemaya V'Chayim Aleinu V'Al Kol Yisrael V'Meru Oseh Shalom Bimromav Hu Yaseh Shalom Aleinu V'Al Kol Yisrael. May God's peace, God bring peace to all of us, to all of humanity, and let us say, Amen. And you may be seated. I'll just share with you some announcements, because next week is a big announcement, right, Laurie Schlitzman? Next week, right? By the way, tomorrow you'll join us at 10 o'clock, either here live or on live streaming for our service. Tomorrow afternoon we have a mincha service of Blake Bustunfar. Looking forward to sharing with the Bustunfar family. Next Friday night, we're going to be at Shomer Torah Synagogue. All right, Shomer Torah Synagogue next Friday night, because first time we've ever done this, we have a joint adult B'nai Mitzvah class from the two congregations. And so, which is really nice. And Laura, you're part of that class. So Friday night, we're going to be celebrating there. And then Shabbat morning, everybody's going to be here from both communities celebrating together. We're just very excited for you and for everybody, Lori. Then there'll be also a Mincha Bar Mitzvah, another one next week, right, for the Linka family, celebrating Aiden's Bar Mitzvah. And there's always services. We're still here as well. If you haven't yet made reservations for the gala, we encourage you to attend. It's going to be a wonderful gala. And we're back. We're trying to be as back as we can. Tell you what, we're going to finish our service with Hattikva in honor of Israel and Yom HaAtzmaut. So we're going to invite you to rise. Page 449. Is that correct, Chazan Stein?
48, I believe. 48.
448?
Yes.
All right, let me find my way back there. Hold on. Let's make sure. 400. That's way in the back. All right, if you're at home, you want to join us for Hattikva, if you know the words, you'll stand as well. Here we go. Shabbat Shalom, everybody.
Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat, 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 Shabbat.